and the entire lot was absolutely silent. And I'm sure a number of those people did not even know what discipline meant in the English word.
Jinnah addressed the crowd at Lahore's Minto Park for nearly 2 hours. But the future founder of Pakistan could only speak fluently in English.
My father was explaining to me what he was saying. And I did ask him, I said, he's speaking in English. And do the people understand? He said, they've trusted him, so they know what he's saying.
This old man was asked, do you know what he's saying? He's talking in English. He said, I don't know what he's saying, but I know for definite whatever he's saying is the right thing.
He was explaining at that time that the only answer is a separate homeland for the Muslims of India. We have tried all kinds of solutions with other communities and with the British, but unfortunately it has not come to anything. And we have come to this conclusion that now the final solution is that there should be 2 states, with Muslim India and Hindu India. And people understood.
The Lahore session passed a resolution demanding that areas in the northeast and northwest of India, where the Muslims were a majority, should become independent states. But the resolution was deliberately vague as to whether these states should be inside or outside of federal India.
It just partially advocated the concept of a separate Muslim state, but there were so many loopholes in it, and these loopholes indicated that there was still time if there could be any rapprochement between the Hindus and the Muslims.
While his followers believed he was talking about a separate Pakistan, for Jinnah it was more of a maximum demand. He was now called Qaid-e-Azam, the great leader. By employing the imagery and symbolism of Islam, he'd found he could fire the Muslim masses. But how orthodox a Muslim was he?
He was not a religious man, but he wasn't irreligious either.
Much of the movement's dynamism was coming from the Muslim University at Aligarh, birthplace of the two-nation theory, and now the centre of Muslim League youth activity.
When I went to Aligarh, I think it was for the first time that I saw Mr. Jinnah. Tall, handsome, confident, bold. I was definitely affected by his personality. He galvanized the Muslim masses. He awakened their consciousness and spirit and a sense of destiny and identity. He declared that Aligarh especially was the arsenal of Muslim India. And most of us, most of the students, not only from Aligarh but from other colleges and universities, Muslim students, were trained in special camps so that they could contact each and every voter for the battle that was to be fought.
The Pakistan idea was spreading into the markets and mosques of Muslim India. Some young enthusiasts distributed news sheets to convince the Muslims that they were being done down by the Hindus.
हम कोशिश कर रहे थे कि मुसलमानों को बताएं कि तुम्हारी जो इक्तिसादी हालत है और तुम्हारी तमाम तजारत हिंदुओं के हाथ में है, जो अंग्रेज़ के अपने आदमी है, गरीब जो है गरीब से गरीबतर होते जा रहे हैं। ये जो देहात है, छोटे छोटे गांव में जो थे हिंदू, हमारे मुसलमानों को चीज़ें कर्ज पे देते थे, फिर जिस उनका फसल उठता था उस फसल में वो पैसा देते, फिर उस पर सूद भी लेते थे। चुनांचे बहुत सी ज़मीनें मुसलमानों का जो है हिंदुओं ने उस कर्ज के बदले में रख लिया था। तो यहाँ के लोगों को जो है हिंदुओं के इस अमल के खिलाफ बहुत नफरत थी, बहुत शिकायत।
In 1942, with the fall of Singapore and Rangoon, the war reached India's doorstep. The British government, desperate for India's help, sent Cabinet Minister Sir Stafford Cripps to win over Congress and the Muslim League.
And we hope that the Indian leaders will give the help they have already promised us as regards the mobilization of that great people in the protection of their own country.
In exchange for Jinnah's cooperation, Cripps conceded that any province could opt out of a future independent India. But Jinnah, now raising the stakes, rejected the offer on the grounds that Pakistan was not explicitly named. Jinnah was talking tough, but his purpose was still unclear. Did he want his Pakistan to stay within India or to become a new separate state? In September 1944, the house on Malabar Hill was the scene of lengthy negotiations between Jinnah and Gandhi, his old adversary, who had recently been released from detention. The Mahatma journeyed to Jinnah, still hoping to persuade him back into the all-India fold.
I think like two stalwarts doing a case, each recognized the merit of the other and was trying to find a weakness in the point of view of the other.
I think Gandhi realized that he was up against a sort of rock, as it were, who wasn't going to budge. And Jinnah realized he was up against a very clever fellow, which he was.
And both were a match for each other. Now, for example, the famous incident where in the very first day, Mr. Gandhi said, "You have mesmerized the Muslims." Mr. Jinnah retorted, "You have hypnotized the Hindus."
But the talks got nowhere. The two men stuck to their old positions. Gandhi refused to accept that India contained two nations, of Hindus and Muslims. Jinnah insisted on their separateness.
Mr. Jinnah claimed that he will only represent the Muslims. And Mr. Gandhi said he's representing whole of India. And Mr. Jinnah cornered him and says, "No, you cannot. You can at the most say that you are representing the Congress. And Congress in turn represents predominantly the Hindus."
There was another stumbling block in our way. Now, we couldn't say that Congress is a Hindu organization. It was impossible for us to say it because we were not a Hindu organization. Congress was a nationalist organization comprising of all nationalities and all communities. If I participated in the struggle for freedom, it is as an Indian, not exactly as a Muslim.
The talks may have failed, but Jinnah's status was heightened simply by the Mahatma's public recognition of him. Jinnah's secretary, Sharifuddin Pirzada, was present throughout.
Mr. Jinnah's point was that he will make his best efforts to convince Mr. Gandhi about the possibility of establishment of Pakistan. At least he should accept the principle. Then the details can be worked out subsequently. So Mr. Jinnah was able to project Pakistan in this way. And these talks more or less received international notice.
For Gandhi, the talks were a disaster. For Jinnah, they were an inspiration. With Gandhi and Jinnah at loggerheads, the Viceroy, Lord Wavell, who believed independence was now inevitable, called a conference at the hill resort of Simla to discuss membership of a transitional government. Jinnah insisted that all Muslims in any such government had to be members of his Muslim League, cutting out Muslims who belonged to Congress and other parties. The talks collapsed.
At last, Labour is in power in Britain, and here are some members of the new government, the Prime Minister and Sir Stafford Cripps.
The new Labour government in London promised independence for India. It decided to call elections, the first since 1937, to assess the strengths of Congress and the Muslim League.
And we decided to go to the villages and small towns and gave them the message of Muslim League, that why did we want a separate homeland for the Muslims. The impact was electric, absolutely.
League support was growing all the time, but Congress was blind to it. Its leaders, like Nehru, had spent the last 3 years of the war in prison and completely underestimated Jinnah's mass appeal. The League won almost 90% of the Muslim vote in the elections. It was now clearly the